Princess of the Ethereal Dominion stood at the observation deck of the massive battle cruiser, Edge, her crystalline skin shimmering with barely contained frustration. Through the transparent aluminum viewport, she watched the batch of alien recruits stumble through their basic combat drills in the training bay below. Most were impressive specimens, towering warriors with their natural exoskeletons, swift assassins with their phase-shifting abilities, and hulking berserkers whose rage could level buildings. Then there was the human. Moved with what could generously be called adequate coordination, his simple cloth uniform a stark contrast to the advanced combat gear worn by his fellow trainees. No natural armor, no energy projection capabilities, no enhanced reflexes or superhuman strength. Just flesh and bone wrapped in determination that bordered on the absurd. "Your Highness," came the melodic voice of Commander, the Dominion's chief military strategist. His four arms gestured elegantly as he approached, his features betraying mild concern. "The Convergence Council has approved your request to observe the training program, but I must advise caution regarding your particular interest in the human specimen." Didn't turn from the viewport. Below had just been knocked flat by a casual backhand, the impact sending him sliding across the training mat. Any other species would have stayed down, bones shattered, pride broken. The human rolled to his feet, wiped blood from his split lip, and assumed a fighting stance again. "Fascinating," she murmured, her voice carrying the musical quality of her people. "Tell me, Commander, what do the preliminary assessments say about Subject 47C? His mandibles clicked in what passed for a sigh among his kind. "The human, physical capabilities rank in the bottom third percentile across all metrics. Reaction time is adequate but unremarkable. No detectable psionic abilities, no natural weaponry, no regenerative capabilities. In summary, Your Highness, he is spectacularly ordinary." And yet, consulted his holographic data pad, his secondary arms working the controls while his primary ones gestured. "His psychological profile is unusual. Stress response indicators suggest an almost pathological inability to accept defeat. When faced with superior opponents, instead of the normal fight-or-flight response, his cortisol levels actually decrease while adrenaline production increases. Are calling it an anomaly." Princess finally turned, her luminous violet eyes meeting the commander's compound ones. "How many times has he been defeated in training exercises?" "Every single engagement, Your Highness. 43 consecutive defeats across various combat scenarios." "And how many times has he requested transfer to a different program or asked for combat modifications?" Silence was answer enough. Down in the training bay, faced off against a warrior whose natural camouflage made him nearly invisible. The alien could phase in and out of visibility at will, striking from impossible angles before disappearing again. It was like fighting smoke with substance, and was losing badly. Blue-black bruises covered his arms and torso where the energy claws had found their mark. But the human kept adapting. After the 20th strike, Noticed had begun tracking his opponent's breathing pattern. They might be invisible, but they still needed to breathe, and breath meant air displacement. When the alien materialized for what should have been the finishing blow, was waiting. His counterattack was clumsy by galactic standards, but it connected. They hit the ground hard, compound eyes wide with shock. "Impossible," whispered. The probability calculations suggested a 0% chance of success. "Your calculations," the princess said softly, "didn't account for human stubbornness." The training session continued and faced opponent after opponent. He lost every match, technically speaking, but each defeat taught him something new. Against the berserker, he learned to use the larger being's momentum against him. Fighting the energy-wielding Ran, he discovered how to read the subtle pre-attack gestures that preceded their plasma blasts. Each loss was a lesson, each lesson a small victory. 3 hours later, finally collapsed from exhaustion, his uniform soaked with sweat and various alien equivalents of blood. The medical bay's healing pods would have him ready for the next session in 6 hours. The other trainees would spend that time in meditation, mental conditioning, or equipment maintenance. Would spend it analyzing combat footage and studying alien anatomy texts. "Your Highness," ventured carefully, "perhaps you've seen enough. The human is clearly not suitable for our elite guard program, his physical limitations alone." "Schedule a private meeting," Princess interrupted. "I want to speak with him." "Your Highness, protocol dictates that royal contact with trainees should be minimal until—" "Commander," Her voice carried the harmonic authority that had been bred into the royal bloodline over. Schedule the meeting. 2 days later, found himself in the most opulent chamber he'd ever seen. The princess's private study aboard the Edge was a marvel of crystalline architecture and bioluminescent art. Floating data screens displayed star charts and diplomatic communications in languages he couldn't read, while gentle music seemed to emanate from the very walls themselves. Princess was even more striking in person. Standing nearly 8 feet tall, her translucent skin revealed the subtle flow of energy beneath its surface. Her hair moved as if underwater, each strand alive with its own inner light. She was, by any objective measure, the most beautiful being had ever encountered. She was also, he reminded himself, probably capable of killing him with a thought. "Please sit," she said, gesturing to a chair that molded itself to his human proportions. "I trust the medical bay treated your injuries adequately." "Yes, Your Highness, thank you." His voice was steady despite the surreal nature of the situation. "If I may ask, why did you want to see me?" She moved to the viewport, her flowing robes trailing behind her like captured starlight. "Tell me about your home world. What is Earth like?" The question caught him off guard. "It's diverse, Your Highness. Many different climates, cultures, species. We haven't achieved the kind of unity that most galactic civilizations seem to have. We still fight among ourselves over resources, territory, ideology. And yet you've applied to join the Dominion's most elite military unit. Why?" Considered his answer carefully. "Because when I learned about the ultimate beasts, about the threat they pose to all intelligent life, I knew I had to help. Even if I'm not the strongest or fastest or most gifted candidate, I can still try to make a difference." Princess turned back to him, her expression unreadable. "The ultimate beasts have destroyed entire star systems. They've consumed civilizations that had technology beyond your world's current comprehension. What makes you think humanity has anything to offer in such a conflict?" "Maybe we don't," he admitted, "but maybe that's not the right question." "Oh, what would be the right question?" Leaned forward slightly. "Maybe the question isn't what we can offer, but what we're willing to sacrifice. Every species I've met here has incredible abilities, natural advantages that took millions of years to evolve. But they also have something to lose. They have their warrior culture, they have their ancestral hunting grounds, they have their clan territories. And humans, we're used to being the underdog, Your Highness. We're used to fighting impossible odds with inadequate resources. We're used to losing and getting back up anyway. When everything else is gone, when all the advantages are stripped away, what's left is the willingness to keep trying." The princess was quiet for a long moment, her luminous eyes studying his face. "You know, you're the first trainee who hasn't asked me about the nature of the ultimate beasts. Aren't you curious about what you're training to fight?" "I figure I'll learn what I need to know when I need to know it. Right now, my job is to get stronger, faster, better. The specifics of the enemy can come later." "Interesting philosophy." She moved to her desk, where a holographic display showed training performance metrics. "Your scores are improving, but slowly. At your current rate of advancement, it would take approximately 47 standard years for you to reach minimum combat effectiveness against ultimate beast variants." Shrugged, "Then I'd better get started." Princess felt something she hadn't experienced in decades, genuine surprise. The human's response wasn't bravado or ignorance. It was simple acceptance of an impossible challenge, coupled with an unshakable determination to meet it anyway. "Tell me about your defeats. How does it feel to lose every single training exercise?" "Like learning," he said without hesitation. "Every time I get knocked down, I understand something new about combat, about my opponents, about myself. Winning would feel good, but losing teaches me more. And when you face the ultimate beasts, when your life depends on victory rather than education." For the first time, expression grew serious. "Then I'll use everything I've learned from losing to make sure I don't lose when it matters." The princess moved to a secured cabinet and a data pad containing classified information. "What I'm about to show you is known only to the highest levels of Dominion command. The ultimate beasts aren't just powerful, they're adaptive. They learn from every encounter, incorporate the abilities of defeated enemies into their own arsenal. They've faced and overcome the greatest military minds, the most advanced technologies, the most powerful psionics in the galaxy." Images flashed across the data pad's screen, massive creatures that seemed to be composed of living metal and organic tissue in impossible combinations. Some moved through space without ships, others wielded energies that could crack planets. All of them radiated an aura of absolute, incomprehensible menace. "They've never encountered humanity," said, studying the images with scientific detachment. "Precisely, and that unknown factor could be either our greatest advantage or our final doom. The Convergence Council is divided on whether to include humans in our forces or evacuate your species to protected sectors until the conflict ends." Looked up from the data pad, "What do you think they should do?" Princess found herself genuinely considering the question rather than testing him with it. "I think," she said slowly, "that conventional wisdom suggests evacuation is the logical choice. Humans lack the natural advantages necessary for this level of warfare. But conventional wisdom has failed against the ultimate beasts for the past 2 centuries. Perhaps it's time to try something unconventional." Nodded, then asked quietly, "Your Highness, may I ask you something?" "Of course." "Your royalty, presumably with important duties and responsibilities. Why are you personally observing trainee sessions? Why take the time to meet with the worst performer in the program?" The question hit closer to home than she'd expected. "Because," she said after a moment, "I've spent my entire life surrounded by the finest minds, the strongest warriors, the most advanced beings in the galaxy. And despite all their power and wisdom, we're losing this war. Maybe what we need isn't more of the same. Maybe we need something different." "Someone expendable?" asked, not unkindly. "Someone willing to be expendable," she corrected. "There's a difference." 3 days after their meeting, Princess received an urgent communication from Commander. A training incident had occurred. A malfunction in the simulation chamber had created a scenario far beyond the safety parameters. Several trainees were trapped in a virtual environment that had become all too real, their minds locked in a combat situation their bodies couldn't escape. "The warriors have gone into defensive shells, they have entered healing trances, and they are in rage-induced comas," reported, his 4 arms moving frantically across multiple control panels. "Our best technicians estimate it will take 6 hours to safely extract them without causing permanent psychological damage." "What about the human?" "That's why I called you, Your Highness. He's still active in the simulation. More than active, he's trying to reach the other trainees." Princess hurried to the simulation center, where banks of monitors showed vital signs and neural activity. His body lay motionless in the simulation pod, but his mind was fighting through digital hell. On the main screen, she could see his avatar moving through a landscape of fire and shadow, carrying unconscious alien forms toward what appeared to be a safe zone. "His stress indicators should have triggered an automatic shutdown hours ago," one technician reported. "But somehow he's overriding the safety protocols through sheer willpower. We don't understand how it's possible." On screen, Savitar stumbled under the weight of a massive warrior, enemy fire erupting around them. His health indicators were in the red. His virtual body should have collapsed from exhaustion long ago. But he kept moving, 1 step at a time, dragging his fellow trainee to safety. "He's been at this for 4.5 hours, said quietly. "He could have reached the extraction point himself in the first 30 minutes. Instead, he's gone back for each of the others." Princess watched in fascination as finally reached the safe zone with his last rescue, his avatar collapsing just as the simulation's threat level began to decrease. Automatically, the extraction sequence began, slowly bringing all the trainees back to consciousness. Was the last to awaken, his eyes opening to find Princess standing beside his pod. "Did everyone make it out?" were his first words. "Yes," she said softly, "they all made it out." "Good." He tried to sit up, winced, and lay back down. "I guess the simulation was more realistic than I thought." The princess said, "You do realize you could have escaped immediately, that you chose to risk your own mind to save beings who have consistently defeated you in training." He looked at her with genuine confusion. "They're my squad mates, Your Highness. Of course I went back for them." That night, Princess made a decision that would change the course of the war. She sent an encrypted message to the Convergence Council, recommending immediate integration of human forces into the Dominion military, not as support troops or engineers, but as frontline combatants. Her reasoning was simple. They had spent 2 centuries trying to match the ultimate beast's power with power, their adaptability with technology, their ruthlessness with tactical superiority. All of it had failed. Perhaps it was time to try something the ultimate beasts had never encountered before. Perhaps it was time to try hope. Commander found her in her study late that night, staring out at the stars. "Your Highness, the Council is requesting additional data to support your recommendation. They find it difficult to believe that a species with such limited combat capabilities could contribute meaningfully to the war effort." "Show them the simulation recordings," she said without turning around. "All of them. They've already seen the rescue operation. They're calling it an anomaly." Princess finally faced him, her expression resolute. "Then show them the combat training sessions. Every single defeat, every time he got back up, every time he adapted to an impossible situation. Show them 43 consecutive losses followed by 43 consecutive attempts to do better. Your Highness, with respect, losses are still losses." "Yes," she said, moving to her personal communication console. "But sometimes, Commander, the willingness to lose everything is the only way to win anything." As she began composing her detailed report to the Council, Princess found herself thinking about's words. Maybe the question isn't what we can offer, but what we're willing to sacrifice. The ultimate beasts had conquered every opponent by overwhelming them with superior force, by adapting faster than their enemies could respond, by being more ruthless than any civilized species could match. They had never faced an enemy willing to lose in order to win, willing to sacrifice everything for the chance to save others, willing to keep fighting long past the point of rational hope. They had never faced humanity. Outside her viewport, the first human transport ships were already approaching from the direction of Earth, carrying volunteers who had answered the call without fully understanding what they were volunteering for. Simple people with simple tools, ready to stand against the darkness that had consumed entire galactic civilizations. Princess smiled for the first time in months. The ultimate beasts were about to learn something new. 3 months after Princess's recommendation reached the Convergence Council, the first human battalion arrived at Forward Operating Base Nexus Prime, the Dominion's primary staging ground for ultimate beast encounters. Stepped off the transport alongside 500 other humans, all volunteers from Earth's various military forces. Unlike the pampered environment of the training facility, Nexus Prime was purely functional. A massive asteroid hollowed out and converted into a fortress, bristling with weapons and shields that could theoretically hold off anything short of a planet killer. Theoretically. Sweet mother of, Sergeant First Class Maria Santos whistled low as she took in the size of the station. And I thought the Pentagon was big. Adjusted his gear pack and looked around at his fellow humans. They came from every continent, every culture, every military tradition Earth had to offer. Former enemies stood side by side, united by a threat so large that national boundaries seemed absurdly small in comparison. Chinese naval officers worked alongside American Marines. Russian commandos shared equipment with British SAS. Israeli Special Forces compared notes with Iranian military engineers. "Attention, human forces," came a voice over the comm system. "Report to Briefing Chamber 7 for integration protocols." The chamber they entered was designed for beings much larger than humans. Even with the seating adjusted, felt dwarfed by the sheer scale of everything. Princess stood at the front of the room alongside Commander and several other high-ranking Dominion officers. Her presence seemed to fill the space despite her graceful proportions. "Welcome to Nexus Prime," she began, her musical voice carrying easily through the chamber. "You are here because your species has volunteered to join a war that has already cost the galaxy billions of lives. I will not lie to you. The mortality rate for forces engaging ultimate beasts directly is approximately 93%. A murmur ran through the assembled humans, but no one stood to leave. "The entities you will be fighting are unlike anything in your experience. They are not merely powerful. They are adaptive, intelligent, and utterly hostile to all forms of organized life. They have consumed entire civilizations, incorporating their knowledge and abilities into an ever-growing arsenal of destruction." Captain Jake, a Marine officer from Australia, raised his hand. "Your Highness, what exactly makes these things so hard to kill?" "An excellent question, Captain." The Princess activated a holographic display showing various ultimate beast encounters. Traditional military doctrine relies on identifying enemy weaknesses and exploiting them. The ultimate beasts have no fixed weaknesses. They adapt to overcome any strategy used against them. Energy weapons become ineffective after initial contact. Kinetic weaponry is absorbed and transformed into defensive systems. Biological and chemical agents are neutralized and sometimes turned back on their users. Lieutenant Colonel Sarah, no relation to despite the shared surname, leaned forward. So how do we fight something that adapts to everything we throw at it? Princess exchanged glances with Commander before responding. Honestly, Colonel, we don't know. Every conventional approach has failed. That's why you're here. Because we're unconventional? Asked Major David. Because you're human, Commander interjected, his mandibles clicking nervously. Your species exhibits certain behavioral patterns that are fine, difficult to predict. This unpredictability may be our only advantage. Over the following weeks, the human forces were integrated into mixed units with alien troops who had been fighting the ultimate beasts for years. The cultural exchange was fascinating and often hilarious. Found himself partnered with a warrior named, whose natural armor made him nearly invulnerable, but whose rigid tactical thinking sometimes created blindness to unconventional solutions. Human, said during one planning session, his vocal apparatus struggling with human pronunciation. Your suggested approach to breaching the enemy fortification is illogical. Looked up from the tactical display, why? The optimal route requires traversing 300 meters of open ground under direct fire. Survival probability is less than 12%. Right, but that's assuming they expect us to take the optimal route. What if we do something stupid instead? This compound eyes blinked in sequence. Deliberately choose a suboptimal strategy. Sometimes the best way through is the way no one expects you to try. It was during these integration exercises that the humans began to demonstrate what would later be called the Terran factor, the tendency to find solutions that were simultaneously effective and completely contrary to accepted military wisdom. When faced with an impossible defensive position, Sergeant Santos suggested they surrender and let themselves be captured, then escape from inside the enemy installation. When confronted by a superior force with overwhelming firepower, Corporal Johnson recommended they charge directly at the biggest guns while screaming at the top of their lungs. Both strategies worked. I'm beginning to understand, Princess confided to Commander after reviewing the exercise reports, why humanity survived long enough to develop space travel. They don't think in terms of optimal solutions, they think in terms of working solutions. The first real test came sooner than anyone expected. Long-range sensors detected an ultimate beast incursion in the Ra system, a single entity, classified as a Class VII planetary consumer. Previous encounters with similar entities had resulted in the complete loss of 3 different battle fleets and the evacuation of an entire solar system. This is our opportunity, Princess announced during the emergency briefing. A single target allows us to test human integration without risking total fleet destruction. Admiral, the Dominion's chief military strategist, disagreed vehemently. Your Highness, with all due respect, a Class VII entity destroyed the entire hegemony. Sending untested human forces against such a target is tantamount to execution. Then we'll test them carefully, she replied. A small mixed force with human elements integrated into proven unit structures. If they perform as I believe they will, we escalate deployment. If not, we bury another 500 humans and continue losing this war as we have for the past 2 centuries, the Admiral said bluntly. Volunteered for the mission immediately, as did most of the other humans. They were assigned to support roles initially: engineers, communications specialists, logistics coordinators. Nothing that would put them directly in harm's way during their first ultimate beast encounter. The mission force consisted of 12 ships, 8 Dominion cruisers, 2 assault vessels, 1 stealth ship, and a human transport designated Endurance. The human ship was old by galactic standards, fusion-powered rather than antimatter-driven kinetic weapons instead of energy projectors, traditional armor instead of deflector shields. By any reasonable metric, it was the weakest vessel in the fleet. The ultimate beast they found in the Ra system description. Roughly spherical but constantly shifting, it measured nearly 2 kilometers in diameter and seemed to be composed of equal parts organic tissue, crystalline growths, and metallic constructions. It moved through space without any visible propulsion, consuming asteroids and space debris while growing visibly larger with each meal. "Sweet Jesus," whispered communications specialist Lisa Park, watching the entity through the Endurance viewports. "It's eating the asteroid belt." "Fleet Command, this is Admiral," came the transmission from the flagship. "Beginning standard engagement protocol. All units maintain maximum safe distance and prepare to execute pattern Sigma on my mark." Watched from the communications bay as the Dominion forces deployed in a complex formation around the ultimate beast. Energy beams lanced out from the cruisers, striking the entity's surface with enough force to glass a small moon. The creature's response was immediate. Its surface rippled and reformed, creating reflective patches that sent the energy beams back at their sources. Two cruisers were forced to break formation to avoid their own reflected fire. "Pattern Sigma is ineffective," Admiral reported. "Entity shows adaptive shielding, switching to pattern Lambda." The fleet regrouped and attacked from multiple angles simultaneously, using kinetic projectiles and plasma charges in coordinated volleys. The ultimate beast absorbed the incoming fire, its surface shifting and changing until it began launching identical projectiles back at the attackers. One of the assault vessels took a direct hit and had to retreat with severe damage to its armor plating. "Lambda ineffective. Entity has incorporated our weapons technology, falling back to defensive positions." Princess, aboard the flagship as military observer, watched the engagement with growing concern. The ultimate beast wasn't just defending itself, it was learning. With each attack pattern, it became more effective at countering Dominion tactics. Soon it would begin its own assault, and based on previous encounters, that assault would be devastating. "Your Highness," Kame's voice over the communications channel, requesting permission to speak. "Go ahead. The entity is adapting to everything we throw at it, right? Learning from our attacks and turning them back on us." "That appears to be the case. What if we gave it something really stupid to learn from?" Before anyone could ask what he meant, was already moving. He made his way to the Endurance bridge, where Captain Elizabeth Torres was monitoring the engagement from their position at the fleet's rear. "Captain, I need to borrow a shuttle." "Excuse me. Just for a few minutes, I want to try something." Captain Torres looked at the tactical display, where the ultimate beast had just launched a volley of adapted Dominion weapons at the retreating fleet. "That thing is 2 kilometers across and has already figured out how to beat our best military technology. What exactly do you think you can accomplish in a shuttle?" "Maybe nothing, but it's learning from our advanced tactics, right? What happens if we show it something really, really primitive?" 20 minutes later was piloting a standard utility shuttle toward the ultimate beast at maximum speed. The shuttle was armed with nothing more sophisticated than chemical rockets and a single kinetic cannon that fired solid metal slugs. By galactic standards, it was barely more advanced than a stone axe. "Human vessel," came Admiral's urgent transmission. "You are not authorized for direct engagement. Return to formation immediately." "Sorry, Admiral," replied, switching off his receiver. "Can't hear you, communication problems." The ultimate beast's attention shifted to the approaching shuttle with what might have been curiosity. Energy projectors that had been focused on the retreating fleet turned toward this new, insignificant target. Beams of force that could have cut through a battleship's armor struck the shuttle's primitive hull. And did absolutely nothing. The energy beams, designed to penetrate advanced deflector shields and exotic armor composites, passed harmlessly through the shuttle's simple metal plating. The entity fired again, then again, each time with increasing intensity. The shuttle continued its approach, completely unaffected. "Fascinating," Princess breathed, watching from the flagship. "The entity's weapons are too sophisticated to interact with primitive technology." "It's like trying to shoot a wooden shield with a phaser," Commander added. "The targeting systems can't lock onto something that doesn't register as a threat." Brought the shuttle in close, dangerously close, and began firing his kinetic cannon at point-blank range. Solid metal slugs, propelled by simple chemical explosives, slammed into the ultimate beast's surface. The entity's adaptive armor, designed to deflect energy weapons and exotic matter, had no protocols for dealing with basic kinetic impact. Each slug punched through several layers of the creature's sophisticated defenses before finally being stopped by deeper tissue. The ultimate beast's response was immediate and telling. Its surface began adapting, creating armor specifically designed to stop kinetic projectiles. But in doing so, it sacrificed some of its energy weapon defenses. The creature was learning, but it was learning the wrong lesson. All units, Princess' voice carried across the fleet communications, resume engagement with kinetic weapons only. Repeat, kinetic weapons only. The Dominion fleet attacked again, this time using only their most primitive armaments. Missile launchers and mass drivers, weapons they hadn't relied on in centuries, emerged from storage and began hammering the ultimate beast. The creature tried to adapt, but each time it reinforced its defenses against one type of attack, it became vulnerable to another. "It's confused," Admiral reported with something like amazement in his voice. "The entity's adaptation algorithms are designed for advanced warfare. It doesn't know how to handle multiple primitive attack vectors simultaneously." Continued his close-range assault, staying within the ultimate beast's minimum engagement range, where its larger weapons couldn't target him effectively. The shuttle took damage from debris and secondary explosions, but its simple construction meant that what would have been fatal to a sophisticated vessel was merely inconvenient. "Human," Kame's voice over the comm, "your tactical approach violates 17 different principles of engagement doctrine." "I know," replied, launching another volley of chemical rockets. "Isn't it great?" The ultimate beast began showing signs of genuine distress. Its adaptive systems, overwhelmed by the need to counter multiple primitive technologies simultaneously, started making errors. Defensive patches intended to stop kinetic weapons interfered with energy projection systems. Adaptive armor that could deflect plasma charges became vulnerable to simple explosive devices. "The entity is experiencing cascading system failures," reported the fleet's science officer. "Its adaptation matrix cannot reconcile primitive threats with advanced defensive protocols." What followed was like watching a sophisticated computer virus destroy itself trying to process corrupted data. The ultimate beast's surface began rippling chaotically, its weapons firing randomly, its movement becoming erratic. The creature that had consumed entire star systems was being defeated by technology that Earth had mastered centuries ago. The kill shot came from an unexpected source. Corporal David, manning one of the Endurance torpedo tubes, fired a single nuclear warhead, a weapon so primitive by galactic standards that most civilizations had abandoned it ago. The ultimate beast's defenses, designed to counter antimatter bombs and dimensional disruptors, had no protocols for dealing with simple nuclear fusion. The explosion tore through the creature's confused defensive matrix and detonated its power core. 2 kilometers of ultimate beast vanished in a flash of light that was visible from the outer system. In the aftermath, as the fleet regrouped and assessed the unprecedented victory, Princess found herself staring at the debris field where the ultimate beast had died. For 2 centuries, the galaxy's most advanced military minds had been trying to outthink, out-tech, and outfight an enemy that adapted to everything they threw at it. It took a human with a chemical rocket launcher to realize that sometimes the best way to win against superior technology was to use inferior technology. "Your Highness," Commander said quietly, "perhaps we should reconsider our entire approach to this war." "Perhaps we should," she agreed. "Commander, I want every human military tactic, every primitive weapons system, every obsolete technology in Earth's databases uploaded to our strategic planning computers. If the ultimate beasts want to adapt to our methods, let's give them something truly impossible to understand." "Human methods." Princess smiled. "Human methods." As the Endurance docked with the flagship for debriefing, finally understood what the princess had meant about humanity's role in the war. They weren't here because they were the strongest or the most advanced. They were here because sometimes, when facing an impossible enemy, the most powerful weapon wasn't superior technology or sophisticated tactics. Sometimes the most powerful weapon was the willingness to do something stupid and see what happened. The ultimate beasts were about to learn that lesson the hard way. 6 months after the Raw victory, the war against the ultimate beasts had transformed completely. What had once been a slow retreat across the galaxy had become something unprecedented, a coordinated counteroffensive. Human tactics and technology had been integrated into every level of Dominion military doctrine, from individual squad formations to fleet-wide strategic planning. Stood on the bridge of the newly commissioned hybrid vessel Defiant Hope, watching the final preparations for what would become known as the Battle of the Core Worlds. Around them, the largest fleet in galactic history was assembling. 1,200 Dominion vessels augmented with human technology and crewed by mixed-species teams trained in Terran doctrine, the art of winning through tactical insanity. "Status report," requested Admiral Elizabeth Torres, who had been promoted from captain after her successful command of the Endurance. The first human to achieve flag rank in Dominion service, she stood barely 5.5 feet tall next to Princess, who served as military liaison for the royal court. "All human augmented vessels report ready," Commander announced, his 4 arms working multiple control stations simultaneously. Primitive weapon systems loaded, defensive protocols downgraded to pre-space age specifications, and tactical computers programmed with human illogic matrices. "Illogic matrices?" asked. "Our attempt to quantify human decision-making patterns," the princess explained with something that might have been amusement. "The computers can simulate most species' tactical responses with 95% accuracy. For humans, we're lucky to achieve 30%, so we built that uncertainty into the fleet's battle planning." The target of this massive operation was the ultimate beast stronghold at the galactic core, a cluster of 17 conquered systems, where the entities had been building something that long-range sensors couldn't properly identify. Whatever it was large enough to be visible from neighboring star systems and was consuming matter at an alarming rate. Intelligence estimates suggest we're facing between 50 and 70 ultimate beasts of various classifications. Admiral Torres continued the briefing. Class IV through Class XII entities, with at least 3 confirmed planetary consumers and 1 possible system eater. Sergeant Maria Santos, now serving as Chief of Human Tactical Integration, whistled low. "Boss, we barely managed 1 Class VII with our whole bag of tricks. How exactly are we supposed to handle 50 of them?" "The same way humans have always handled impossible odds, Sergeant," the Admiral replied. "We get creative." The fleet began its approach to the core systems, using a formation that would have horrified traditional military strategists. Instead of the carefully planned geometric arrangements favored by most galactic civilizations, the human-influenced ships moved in what appeared to be complete chaos. Fast attack craft darted between massive battleships with no apparent pattern, support vessels changed positions seemingly at random, and the command ships maintained communications through a network of courier shuttles rather than standard subspace channels. "It's beautiful," Princess murmured, watching the tactical display. 1,200 ships moving in perfect coordination while appearing completely disorganized. "Humans call it controlled chaos," explained. "It looks random, but there's method to the madness. The ultimate beasts can't predict our movements because we're not following any predictable pattern." The first contact came 18 hours into the approach, when scout ships detected the outer perimeter of ultimate beast defenses. The entities had transformed entire planets into weapon platforms, creating a network of overlapping fields that made direct assault virtually impossible. Energy barriers that could stop conventional fleets, gravity wells that would crush normal vessels, and adaptive minds that learned from each ship they destroyed. "Standard doctrine would recommend a siege approach," Admiral Torres mused, studying the sensor data. "Establish containment, wear down their defenses gradually over several years." "What does human doctrine recommend?" asked the princess. "We knock on the front door and ask if they're home." What followed was perhaps the most audacious military maneuver in galactic history. Instead of trying to circumvent or overcome the ultimate beast defenses, the human-augmented fleet flew straight into them. Ships that should have been vaporized by energy barriers passed through unharmed because their primitive shields operated on different principles. Gravity wells designed to crush advanced hulls had minimal effect on vessels built using simple metal construction and chemical propulsion. The ultimate beast's response was immediate and predictable. They began adapting their defenses to counter the primitive technologies. Energy barriers recalibrated to stop kinetic weapons, gravity generators tuned to affect chemical propulsion systems, mines to target simple electronics. And that's when the second wave hit them. While the ultimate beasts were busy adapting to primitive human technology, The rest of the fleet attacked using the most advanced weapons systems ever developed. Antimatter cannons, dimensional disruptors, quantum torpedoes, and reality-shearing devices struck defenses that had been optimized to stop chemical explosives and metal projectiles. "Gotcha," Sergeant Santos said with satisfaction as Ultimate Beast installations began exploding throughout the outer system. Classic misdirection play. But the entities learned quickly. Within hours, their defenses had adapted to the advanced weaponry as well, creating hybrid barriers that could stop both primitive and sophisticated attacks simultaneously. The fleet found itself facing exactly the kind of adaptive defense grid that had stymied galactic military forces for centuries. That's when the humans implemented what they called Plan C. "All ships," Admiral Torres announced, "initiate Protocol Insanity." What happened next violated so many principles of military science that Commander would later require therapy to cope with the psychological trauma of witnessing it. The entire fleet began doing things that made no sense whatsoever. Ships fired at empty space, launched torpedoes that deliberately missed their targets, and activated defensive systems while charging directly into enemy fire. "Human Admiral," transmitted from his assault ship, "your orders appear to contain multiple contradictions. Are we attacking or retreating?" "Yes," Admiral Torres replied cheerfully. The Ultimate Beast's adaptive systems began experiencing the same cascading failures that had destroyed the entity at Ra, but on a massive scale. Defensive networks designed to counter logical military tactics couldn't process completely illogical behavior. When the fleet fired at empty space, automated systems assumed they were targeting cloaked enemies and began revealing hidden installations. When ships activated shields while charging into attacks, defensive algorithms tried to calculate the logic behind sacrificial maneuvers and overloaded their processing matrices. Watched from the Defiant Hope bridge as 17 Ultimate Beast installations destroyed themselves trying to adapt to human tactics that didn't actually exist. The entities were so focused on finding the pattern behind the chaos that they couldn't recognize there was no pattern to find. "Defensive grid collapse detected across all 17 systems," reported the science officer. "Ultimate Beast installations are going dark throughout the core region." "Now," Admiral Torres said quietly, "we find out what they've been building." The fleet advanced through the collapsing defenses toward the galactic core, where long-range sensors had detected the massive construction project. As they drew closer, the true scope of the Ultimate Beast's plan became apparent. They had been building a ship. But calling it a ship was like calling a star a candle. The construction stretched across multiple star systems, incorporating entire planets as structural components and using captured stars as power sources. It was a vessel designed to carry the Ultimate Beasts beyond the galaxy, to spread their consumption to other galaxies entirely. "Dear gods," Princess whispered, "if that thing is completed, they could devour the entire universe." The construction was approximately 70% complete, with massive Ultimate Beast entities working to finish the remaining sections. These weren't the relatively small creatures the fleet had fought before. These were Builder-class entities, each one the size of a moon and capable of reshaping matter at the molecular level. "Options?" Admiral Torres asked her staff. "Conventional weapons would take decades to inflict meaningful damage," reported the weapons officer. "The structure is simply too large and too well-defended." "Primitive weapons?" "Even less effective at this scale, Admiral." Studied the tactical display, his mind working through possibilities that would have seemed insane to anyone else. "Admiral, what if we don't try to destroy it?" "Explain." "The Ultimate Beasts are building this thing to leave our galaxy, right? What if we help them leave faster than they planned?" It took several minutes for to explain his plan, and when he finished, the bridge was silent. Finally, Princess spoke. "That," she said slowly, "is either brilliant or completely insane." "With humans," Commander observed, "those categories often overlap." The plan required precise coordination between every ship in the fleet and relied on principles of physics that most civilized species had forgotten ago. Instead of trying to destroy the Ultimate Beast's construction, they would complete it, catastrophically. The fleet split into 3 groups. The first group engaged the builder entities directly, using the same chaotic tactics that had proven successful against the defensive grid. The builders, creatures of pure logic and efficiency, found themselves paralyzed trying to understand attacks that followed no rational pattern. The second group began what appeared to be a desperate assault on the construction's power systems. The ultimate beasts diverted resources to defend their stellar engines, assuming the fleet was trying to cripple their ship. The third group, led by the Defiant Hope, executed the actual plan. Using techniques that Earth's NASA had pioneered centuries ago, they began a controlled gravitational slingshot maneuver around the construction's stellar power sources. But instead of using the gravity wells to accelerate ships, they used them to accelerate the ultimate beast's partially completed vessel. Initiating synchronized gravity assist, announced as his group of ships dove toward the nearest stellar engine. All vessels maintain formation, and remember, we only get one shot at this. The ultimate beasts realized what was happening just as the maneuver reached the point of no return. Their partially completed ship, designed to gradually accelerate over centuries until reaching intergalactic travel speeds, was being subjected to forces equivalent to a stellar collision. The incomplete structure couldn't handle the stress, but it couldn't be stopped either. Construction is accelerating past design parameters, reported the science officer. Structural integrity failing throughout all 17 systems. The ultimate beast's vast ship began tearing itself apart as it accelerated toward escape velocity. Builder entities desperately tried to reinforce failing sections, but the gravitational forces were too extreme. Entire planets broke free from the structure and were flung into space. The captured stars that served as engines went nova simultaneously, adding their energy to the catastrophic acceleration. "Fleet emergency retreat," Admiral Torres ordered. "Maximum burn all ships." The human-augmented fleet fled at top speed as the ultimate beast's construction completed its uncontrolled launch sequence. The ship that was supposed to carry them to other galaxies became a missile that would travel far beyond their intended destination, carrying with it every ultimate beast in the core systems. The explosion when the ship's power systems finally overloaded was visible from Earth. In the aftermath, as the fleet regrouped at a safe distance and survey teams began assessing the damage, Princess found herself on the Defiant Hope observation deck with. The galactic core still glowed with residual energy from the ultimate beast's forced departure, but long-range sensors showed no sign of surviving entities. "Is it over?" she asked. This group, yes, replied. "But there are probably more out there in other galaxies. The universe is a big place." "And if they come back?" Smiled, "Then we'll do something stupid and see what happens." Princess looked out at the stars, thinking about the past year and how much everything had changed. A war that had seemed hopeless had been won by beings who had no business being able to win it. The most sophisticated military force in galactic history had been defeated by creatures who thought chemical explosives and kinetic weapons were the height of technology. She said quietly, "I owe you an apology." "For what?" "When I first saw you in training, I thought you were just another simple trainee. I had no idea what humanity was capable of." Shrugged, "To be fair, Your Highness, we had no idea what we were capable of either. We just kept trying things until something worked." And that, Princess realized, may be the most terrifying military doctrine ever developed. 3 months later was back on Earth, in a small inn his, having coffee with his sister, and trying to explain why he'd been gone for over a year without being able to tell her where he'd been or what he'd been doing. "So let me get this straight," his sister said. "You joined some kind of classified military program, traveled to places you can't name, fought enemies you can't describe, and saved the galaxy using tactics that nobody understands." "More or less, yeah. And now you're back to your old job at the engineering firm." "The galaxy's safe for now," said, watching news reports about the strange lights that had appeared in the night sky 3 months ago. "Besides, someone has to design better bridges." His sister stared at him for a long moment, then shook her head. "You know what? I always knew you were going to do something important someday. I just thought it would be something normal, like curing cancer or inventing cold fusion." "Sorry to disappoint you." "Disappoint me? Are you kidding?" she grinned. "My brother saved the universe by being too stupid to quit. I'm putting that on your next birthday cake." Laughed, and for the first time in months, felt truly at home. The ultimate beasts were gone, the galaxy was safe, and somewhere in space, Princess was probably dealing with the political aftermath of a war that had been won through the judicious application of human stubbornness. It wasn't the ending anyone would have predicted. But then again, humans had never been good at following other people's predictions. High above Earth's atmosphere, a small Dominion courier ship maintained a watching orbit. Princess had insisted on a monitoring station, just in case humanity was needed again. The ultimate beasts might be gone, but the universe was full of other threats, and she had a feeling that Earth's most dangerous export wasn't its technology or its weapons. It was its people, and their absolute refusal to accept that anything was impossible. Somewhere in the depths of space, other entities took note of the ultimate beast's sudden disappearance and began making plans of their own. They studied the reports, analyzed the tactical data, and prepared countermeasures for the sophisticated weapons that had achieved this unprecedented victory. None of them thought to prepare for chemical explosives and kinetic projectiles, fired by beings who had learned warfare by throwing rocks at each other. That would be their first mistake. And their last,